But no, I saw Scott. You did the Skype thing with Morgan and Peyton, and I just was like, hey, why not, throw some coaches together, do something cool, do something different. I know this thing has just been crazy for all of us, especially for, the high school level is that, no open gyms, no preparation for summer league. Everything's just kind of paused, and I just was kind of, why not get back to some sort of normalcy and, talk some hoop, talk some shop. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I kind of wanted to go for on this.
We should go around and introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
Lead us off.
Oh, you want me to? Okay. Hayden Tilton, head coach at Castle Rock. Go Rockets.
Rocket man. All right. Jason Buffum, head coach, Ridgefield Spudders.
Go ahead, Highlander.
Am I next? Start the assistant coaches off. Justin Roberts, Kelso High School assistant. Also using this as an opportunity to get my Twitter going, so that's at coach_Berts, BERTS.
Always working the
called me out. Buffum has called me out for my Twitter followings. I need some help, people. So the 7 people that watch this throughout the next week, go give me a follow if you don't already.
How many followers do you have? I gotta reference this.
Well, let Scott introduce himself.
Yeah,
all right, yeah. Scott Pisapia, Lewis and Clark, women's basketball assistant coach. Back to Robert's Twitter account. Go ahead.
Okay, what do we got? We got following 215 with 124 followers. But hey, this is where it gets good. The bio. Dude, you sound so professional. Director of College Relations and Marketing, Iron Athletics Basketball. Look at that. I mean, that is pristine.
I'd hire him.
Yeah, when you get to create your own title.
Jeez. So,
okay. You want to go ahead? And I got a question ready for Buff.
No, let's go.
All right.
Okay, Coach Buff. I just want to know, you're the longest tenured coach in this group by a long shot. Who's the toughest coach, or a couple of the coaches that you've faced over the years that you've had to coach against?
Well, obviously in our league, there's 2 predominant powerhouses, Columbia River and Mark Morris. Two separate entities of toughness, I guess you'd say. Coach Long at River runs a plethora of well-diagnosed plays that are prepare yourself for about a week to just try to stop what they do. And then obviously, Mark Morris before this year, 17 straight league titles, maybe 18 Tilton, I'm not sure, 17 or 18.
Somewhere around there.
Anyways, in a crazy number, that you just try to slow them down. Those 2 teams obviously are the teams, and then within themselves, the coaches are separate. Obviously, the styles they do. And Mark Morris, depending on his personnel, up tempo, a lot of get out and go, run a few of his standard little sets, but you got to defend the flex, and you got to expect about 15 moving screens a game to come your way. So be ready to get you guys through those. And 2 separate styles for sure, but both easily the 2 toughest teams in our league to prepare for, to play against.
2 legends, Coach Long and Coach Backmiss. Does Coach Long still run the set where it's the fake air ball from the 3-point line for the backdoor lob?
Yeah, that's one of his zone plays. He taps his head, runs a little alley-oop play that usually you yell it out from the sideline, alley-oop, and then they still run it and get it on you. It's really fun to watch that happen live.
What about you guys, Hayden, Justin, tough coaches that you faced, either AAU or regular high school ball?
Roberts, you want to take the lead on this one? I'll follow you.
Oh, gosh. Well, I think piggybacking on Buff, those 2 are obviously 2 really tough programs and tough coaches that we've played a lot over the course of my time around, both as a player and coach at Kelso. But I would say that Prairie is always a tough one for us to play. Prairie, where Coach Brooks has been around for such a long time and has a lot of great players and has that zone. I don't know how they keep running that zone, but it seems to give everybody problems every year. And I don't know how he uses his basketball class, but it's got to be nice to get to think basketball throughout your day too. Gosh. So if Coach Brooks isn't tough enough, he gets to think basketball throughout his day. And speaking of Coach Brooks, while we're here, just want to wish him well as he works on his
Yeah.
recovering and his health issues. Just a quick shout out to Coach Brooks and Prairie, and we'll let Tilton take over. What about you, buddy?
Yeah, same thing with Coach Brooks. Hope he's doing well. I know, having to take a back seat when you're going through health stuff, and then your team, goes to state tournament and stuff. That's got to be tough. Yeah, I would say Coach Harmerling down at Kingsway. Those guys are, they've been on another level for the last 2 years. Maybe longer than that. They got the Mets. The Mets brothers were just, you can't game plan for Bryson Metz, a 5'8" kid that's faster and shiftier and is just the best player on the floor at all times. And, the things that they do, the sets that they run, Jeremy Eklund, it's nice to have Hunter Eklund scoring 1,800 points, and then Evan Norris, and then the Ball brother, so it's nice to have that talent, and what he did with them was great. So, those two coaches in our league, just tough every time we play them. And unfortunately, we haven't quite been on the level that they have. So each game hasn't been much of a match, but those guys, what they do and what they've done has been pretty special. Scotty?
I would say in my conference last year and the year before, it was Coach Meek, George Fox, who's now at University of Portland. He's just such a wizard with X's and O's. Some of the best baseline out of bounds plays I've seen, and they press for every minute of the game, and they do it well. And they just have a number of one hitters that they'll run just to get 2 easy points and then throw the press right back on. So I'd say Coach Meek was probably the toughest that we faced. Thankfully, he's at University of Portland now, so we don't have to face him anymore.
Yeah.
Coach Meek's brother teaches with me at Ridgefield.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is he a basketball wizard also?
He's more of a musical wizard.
Oh,
He's
nice.
a choir teacher. Yeah.
That's awesome. The University of Portland had a good run this year with Coach Meek in his first year. They ended up getting a tournament bid, winning their conference tournament. I'm excited to see what they do. I think they're going to rush it the next decade.
What what are some of the things? I'll ask you this one, Scott, because you're our only college coach. We got a 3A coach, a 2A, a 1A, and a college coach. What is some of the differences, or some of the things that you would tell a high school coach transitioning to college? Like, what are some of the differences, or maybe what are some of the similarities? Because I know there's got to be quite a few.
Well, I think actually Buff would be able to answer this better because he's done both. He's been back and forth. So,
oh, yeah.
But Buff, why don't you take this, and then if there's anything I feel like I can add, I'll try.
I mean, obviously, the number one thing is, in theory, in college, you choose your team. And, some high schools have that luxury too. None of the ones that we coach at seem to have that luxury as much. But, yeah, I mean, getting to choose your style of player you recruit for your coaching style as your program. Like Coach Pisapia was talking about, Coach Meek at UP pressing. Well, if he's got a bunch of slow players, it's going to be hard to press every year. So you choose your team, you get to have your style. We run the swing offense at Ridgefield, and sometimes the personnel doesn't match that much, but you can't recreate the wheel every year. You can adjust some things with your team you have at high school and maybe your set plays, but you got to have some fundamentals that carry over defensively, offensively. But at college, I mean, you should be getting the players that fit your coaching style to allow you to have success. And I think that's what you see when good coaches take new jobs and they don't win right away. It takes them a year or two because they don't have their players in there. I think when you see really good college coaches at a college level, they go to the next job and they still win with the hand they're dealt no matter what. And then they're able to kind of adjust from there. High school, what do you get? 2-3 years max with a kid. If you're lucky, a four-year varsity kid, maybe. I've yet to have one of those at Ridgefield. So I don't know what it would be like to have a kid for 4 years like you do in college. I consider high school more like the NWAC in a lot of ways. You get kids for 2 years at your varsity level. Maybe in your program they're there, but you're actually only coaching them for 2 years. And usually you're having to just play the hand you're dealt. You don't get to fold them and draw 5 new every year. You got to just kind of rotate with the guys you got. So that's all I got on that.
I think Buff nailed it. I have a question for Coach Roberts, actually.
Oh boy.
So
Oh
you and I
boy.
are the only assistants in the mix right now. What are some helpful qualities in a head coach? Like, what are some things that help you be successful as an assistant?
Well, I think I'm really lucky to get to work with Joe Kinch, and for me, what's made my experience so positive is that there's a lot that he allows me to do and a lot that I get to do in terms of scouts and film, and whether that's helping him make our pregame scouts up, or even just getting to be the last person that reads over what he's created and feeling like a part of that process. But he also would never ask me to do anything that just because he doesn't want to do it or because he wants to do less. I think and that's one thing that him and I talked about when I started kind of feeling out the head coach, doing some interviews and that stuff. As a head coach, he's never asked me to do more than he's doing or than he's willing to do. But at the same time, I've gotten to do a lot, and he trusts me with a lot of different aspects of planning practice, scouts, film, even in-game stuff. So I think it's important to, or at least it's made my experience positive, that I'm trusted with things. I get to try some ideas and throw ideas out there, but also I'm never asked to do stuff just because I'm an assistant or just because it's something that the head coach doesn't want to do.
Hayden, on the flip side, what about for an assistant working under you?
Did you know I was Coach Roberts' assistant for 2 great seasons for what was it, 4th grade? I think it was a 4th grade team and a 6th grade team.
4th grade Roots, 7th grade HHC.
Oh, so yeah, yeah, that was yeah. We had some good guys on that 7th grade team. Let's see. Well, right now my assistant, Coach Buff, knows him really well. He was your assistant for a while, Buff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Andrew Johnson is my assistant right now, and he's been fantastic. I think the thing that makes him what he's been for me is that he'll ask the right questions and he'll push me to be a better coach. And that's not stepping on toes. That's not giving his trying to make his voice bigger than mine, but just giving me the right information, what he sees, what he thinks we can do. We went down to play Stevenson this year, and we didn't practice the day before because we had 11 of our 18 guys in our whole program were out sick. I mean, and then I was super sick. I mean, it was the craziest. It was like coronavirus before coronavirus. I mean, it was unreal. And, we're on the bus ride down and we're going, what are we going to do? We got Landon and Adam sleeping in the back. We got guys, borderline throwing up. What are we doing? We don't even know. This is a must win. And, in the pregame, we just put together a little bit of a makeshift zone that we'd never gone over before. And, we're up at halftime and our guys are dying and dogging, but just some of the things that he threw out there kept us in games and kind of gave me a new insight. So, and the kids like him. You got to have a likable assistant, which is nice.
Coach Buff, I got a question for you. Any tips for new coaches on how to have successful relationship with refs? Things to do, not to do.
Boy. Oh boy.
Asking the wrong guy, I think.
I was gonna say I've seen Buff rip off his jacket one too many times.
Yeah, I think that over time you notice you can see like Coach Long, for a great example, like Coach Long, he probably gets away with more than any other coach in the league. But he's also probably one of the most respected coaches by all the officials. When you have success, they respect you. So I think, if you come in, you got to have a little bit of patience as a young coach. I think that guys that come in and get a little bit, I was a perfect example of that myself when I first started. You get a little over your skis and get a little fired up. They don't give you as much leeway. And when you have success, they tend to give you a little more talkability and the main thing is you got to pick and choose your battles. You see guys that complain every time down, and it just doesn't go well for you. And as soon as you develop that reputation, the officials don't really care for you, and next thing you know, that your team starts responding that way as well. So, it's important to have some guidelines there. It's hard because as competitive coaches, we always get fired up in the heat of the moment of the situation, and that's sometimes tends to happen. My jacket comes off occasionally, Coach Tilton. Yes, but that's situational. Only one time this year the jacket came off, so it was a good year. But yeah, it's you gotta have a relationship. You gotta talk to them a little bit. You can't just start the game out by barking at them. And if they know you understand the game, what you're talking about, you can't be yelling travel or moving the screen every time down, and they're like, this guy's just nuts. So you got to pick and choose that and have a rapport. I tend to like to mix in some jokes once in a while with officials to keep them on their toes, and some find them funny, some don't. So hey, move on.
Any good technical foul stories, Buff? Any times you've been teed up that have something memorable?
Ironically, I've only had a handful of technical fouls in my whole career, but there was one at Woodland when I was coaching at Woodland. We were playing Washougal at Washougal in the beautiful facility down there in Pantherland, and Coach Estes was a coach there one coach ago, and he got a tee for stomping his foot, and he didn't really complain, just stomped his foot, got a tee. And they had messed up, as the officials could probably go back in time, and they probably shouldn't have teed him. He was already seated because he wasn't in very good health at the time. So I think they were a little bit remorseful over their tee. About 3 plays later, I yelled, "Geez Louise," and turned around and got whacked. I said, "For saying geez Louise," and he says, "Yes, that's offensive." So about the next couple plays down, all the bench behind us, crowd, including our athletic director at the time, started chanting "Geez Louise" during the game. And the official actually told me that was an offensive terminology, "Geez Louise." So, yeah,
wow.
Sometimes you never know, That's one of the 3 that I've gotten as a coach.
Wow.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you get down to
time to get to
Clark
work,
County
man.
and all down there.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, all 3 of my tees are down here, actually, yeah.
Yeah, the Clark County refs, they've been quick to put the hand out to me. So I've, every time I go down there, I got to be careful.
Coach Roberts, as far as the Kelso Highlander program, when you guys are planning practices, are things pretty similar throughout the year? Or do you guys mix it up quite a bit depending on what part of the season you're in?
I think that generally the structure is pretty similar from day to day, in terms of we want to have some sort of shell drill, whether that's 2v2, 3v3, 4v4, whatever we think we need on a given day. We want to have some sort of defensive technique drill. So we want to see some pressure. So there's a few drills that you're going to see at least one of those few probably every day. And then as we get later in the year, I think it shifts where you start to spend a little bit more time. You get into league play and you know more of what you're going to see. You spend a little more time prepping for specifics. Like if we're playing Fort and Coach Ensley, we know we're going to prepare to see some traps and some run and jumps. So we'll shift practice to see a little bit more pressure stuff. Whereas if we're going to play Prairie, we'll work a lot against zone. And so later in the year, I would say it's more geared towards our upcoming opponent, but early we want to do a lot of technique. We want to do have a progression that makes sense where you have a pressure drill and then you go into a 5v6 period where you're getting doubled and make it applicable that way. But yeah, it's overall similar in structure, but later in the year, definitely see it tailored more towards what we're going to see and what we think we need.
Coach Hayden, what about you?
Hang on, sorry, I got.
He's on the wire. He's busy. He's got phone calls.
No. I just the phone's buzzing. I gotta turn over it and check.
CO is knocking on his
financial advisor.
Yeah. Well, for us, there's we got EDDs, everyday drills. We go out and do our ball handling, passing circuit that we do. There's a couple drills that we that kind of kept working in terms of we saw the game application with what we were doing, and those are the kind of drills that we felt really comfortable with. And of course, you want to throw in new things. No player wants to go into practice and you're doing the same thing every day. But we got our EDDs. We go shell drill every day. That's one of those drills that we really want to harp on. I'm a Monarch guy, so when we were repping shell drill every day, and you got Coach Backus yelling in your ear for 3 years, that's something that you hold on to. And just keeping it fresh and not being afraid to try new things. I took drills from championship productions. I've taken drills from things I've seen on YouTube. I've taken drills from things I've seen watching college games where they talk about something. So, and I'm sure, you, Scott, and Coach Buff, and you do the same thing. There's drills that you like. There's drills that stay the same. There's drills that change with games and trying new things,
Coach Buff, changing subjects, what are some basketball skills that you find rare these days in players? Maybe like some skills that would make them really valuable, but you're missing it year to year?
Surprisingly, kids that come to high school have a hard time setting screens, knowing how to use a screen, especially off the ball. I mean, everybody on ball, Gonzaga's on ball seems to be contagious around here. Every team in our league except us, Mark Morris and River, ran it this year. So you see a lot of on-ball action, but how to use that screen, and when you do set the screen, how do you create space to get open from that screen? And off the ball especially, like how do you screen people to get open? How do you get open by setting the screen? So that's number one for me, and we spend a lot of time practicing that, unfortunately, at the high school level, which I feel like shouldn't be wasted as much time setting screens. But fun. I think the other thing that really probably gets me a little bit rattled is when the kid can't pass. You come into high school and you're still throwing across your body passes. You understand how to ball fake. Every pass is direct line drive. I always make the comment that, it only works against the no arm university. Well, we haven't played them yet. So we play team arms, and those direct line passes, they get tipped a lot. And I think we lead the nation in tip passes every year. So got to work on that. Just feel like every time I go to my youth teams, I say, let's work on fundamentals. Can we bounce pass? Can we left hand push? Can we do basic things? So screening, passing, defense. You watch all these. I mean, you guys everybody in this forum has been around enough AAU to go to a fourth grade AAU game and see everybody playing a 2-3 zone and never extending outside 3-point line, and just watching teams cast up threes and run down their direction, sit in the zone, cast up a three, and not knowing how to close out, not knowing how to shade a guy a certain direction, to take an angle on a dribble, just things that can get me rattled is watching youth basketball play in zone. And I have an 8th grade son. I've watched plenty of youth basketball and seen plenty of kids standing in the zone and not being developed in the proper skills. So, those are the things for me. I think just the defensive philosophies, the basic passing and screening are lost arts. Everybody can shoot a floater. Everybody can shoot an NBA three, which are two of the worst shots probably in basketball for an average player. Floater and a deep three. Those are two unique skills that aren't just coming by the wayside every day. So, yeah.
What would this is a follow up to anybody? What's an underrated skill or talent that a kid has? Something that you don't see maybe on the stat sheet, but something that you as a coach, jumps out to you. What's an underrated? And this is an open question for anybody.
I got two. One is just being able to zigzag up the court under pressure and not turn the ball over, like handling a really good defender full court. And then the second is being able to chill out when two people come flying at you to trap you. Being able to understand okay, I know I'm being trapped, but let me just be strong with it and either pivot out or dribble out or just wait a second until one of my teammates get open. So just not being flustered by those situations. I think those are two skills that go a long way on the stat sheet in assisted turnover ratio.
I think, I would piggyback on that because it immediately makes me think of Dylan Davis for us, who doesn't have a ton of skills that are going to jump out on a box score or as someone's live tweeting a game. But I think down the stretch, he had something like 2 turnovers over our last 4 or 5 games. And that's a guy that's playing. I mean, if he's not playing all 32, he's playing somewhere between 28 and 31 minutes a game as the sole point guard and not turning it over. But it's not because he's got elite quickness or off the charts ball handling, crazy Peyton Pritchard ball handling skills, but he's super smart and he's really tough. He doesn't get rattled by being picked up full court. He doesn't get bothered by seeing a trap. And I don't even know what trait or skill that is, but I wish I had more of it.
3 C's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Coach Buff, Coach Hayden?
I too, those are great things you guys just mentioned. Obviously, we all would like players that have those intangibles. I'm going to give you 2 things that are non-skill on the basketball court or non-things you work out in your individual training. But first one is leadership. And when you have good leadership on a team, I think the team success rate goes up. And coachability. Those are 2 traits that I look for in kids. And if they don't have them, I try to help install those things. And it's like sometimes it's like rebounding and defense. Those things are effort based, right? Sometimes being coachable is an effort based trait, and the more a kid can put into it. And in our program, you're going to get coached, and if you've watched us play, that's going to happen. So it's something that not all kids accept right away, but it's a trait that when they have it, it's pretty easy to work with that kid. And leadership as well. Natural leaders are kind of hard to find these days. Kids don't communicate very well. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but yeah, so having leadership, being able to communicate that on the court, at practice, those are 2 important skills right there for me.
What defines leadership, because for example, our team this last year, we were all sophomores, maybe down the stretch, our best player was a freshman. So, and at times when things were getting crazy, we kind of were looking for a leader. And at times I almost had to ask guys, say, hey, I need you to step up. I need you to be this guy for us. So, is a leader someone who just has it? Is it by example? I think there's a lot of different ways that someone can be a leader. I just, I'm looking for what you guys are thinking.
Yeah. So for our team right now, we have 3 captains, and they're all 3 different in their leadership styles. One is pretty quiet vocally, but just works her butt off on the court and then practice and brings it every single day in the weight room. And so she leads by example. Then we have one that kind of does it behind the scenes, whether that's, the group chat or, organizing stuff as, for the team. And then we have one that does it vocally, like on the court in practice. She'll like call people out and build people up when needed. So we're lucky. We kind of have all 3 styles. And I think those 3 kind of mesh well together because we have someone that people can look at, someone that they can go to, and then someone that will call them out. And so that's kind of been, something that we got lucky that we got, but those are our 3 styles right now on our team for our 3 captains.
Robert's Buff, any input on that?
I don't know how to define leadership. I think it's hard. I think it's tough at the level we're at, and like Buff mentioned earlier, where we're not going out and picking what collection of kids we have from one year to the next, and that's what we're dealing with is kids. So some of these kids they haven't really even started to mature yet. They don't even know if they're a leader or started to develop what type of character they're going to have. And sometimes we see it as we go through a season, and sometimes you look back and go, gosh, if this guy could have just kind of started doing this, he would have been a great example for us, or been a great leader for us. So I think it's really hard to define. I know that the last 4 years prior to this year, we were really lucky with 2 guys in Riley Noah and Shaw Anderson that were phenomenal leaders just in terms of the work they were going to put in, their willingness to, if they needed to, pull other guys along, bring guys in the gym with them. They weren't going to be the first guy to come down on someone or complain to someone. So I think there's a lot of traits in there, but it's hard to define what that might look like in high school basketball, because you fast forward a year and you have guys who have been around for 4 years, but 3 of those years, those 2 guys were there. and now they're not, and they're in a completely different role. They're asked to do a very different things in the game, outside of the game, in the group text, and it's a lot to figure out and understand. And at the end of the day, they are still high school kids that are going to school all day, and when they get home from practice, they're either doing homework or playing video games or Snapchatting or whatever it is they're doing. There's a lot going on outside of the 2 hours a day that we're with them.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Roberts, what was it like when Shaw was on that run?
What's it like coaching a guy like that? What's it like
it
coaching
was,
a guy like that?
It was a lot of fun, and it was I don't know how to describe it other than unbelievable and fun, and I'm just thankful to have been a part of his run, because there was a shift where Shaw was ready to take over.
What game stands out the most?
Well, I think in his senior year, he goes and scores 40 points and breaks the single game scoring record for the second time in 3 games, and goes and scores 48 again against Mountain View at Mountain View. And we needed every single one of those 48 points. Buff can attest to that. We needed every single one of them.
Yes.
45 wasn't going to get it done, and we needed all 48. And I think back to a game at Prairie where he was very reserved and not very aggressive in getting to the rim or demanding the ball. And Coach Kinch and probably some others really challenged him after that game that, hey, this is your team, man. You need to be aggressive. And when you feel like you can go score, you need to go score. When you have the ball, you need to look to score. You're already naturally selfless, and you already naturally share the ball. Now it's time to be aggressive and go get yours, which started a run for him where he just dominated games. And it's incredible when you go up to Puyallup and you go up to Tacoma and you see Emmett Matthews and you see Eric Stevenson and guys that are going and playing at the highest level that you can play, and they come up to Shaw after the game and go, man, we can't stop you. You are unbelievable, man. You are like, and they're just shocked by him. It's like they've never seen a player like him. It was just fun to be a part of, and I'm glad that I'm considered a post coach, because I get to take a small sliver of the credit for that.
I think his run kept going this year.
What'd you say,
he
Bob?
keeps getting better. He keeps getting better every day.
Oh man, yeah, he was scoring 20 plus for those guys.
Freshman of
He
the
gets
year.
bigger and stronger and better every day. It's incredible.
Too.
And has
All
more
right.
ink.
Scotty, since you're an RA long guy,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Monarch. Give me best Civil War and best Monarch Lumberjack rivalry moment. What do you got for me?
Man, I'm gonna go back to like the days when I was watching before I was at RA Long with Adam Perry and those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I was a real big fan of that group. Coach Fowler, Adam Perry, Luke Fowler, Jonah Hobson, Jamie Rivness. Perry was just fun to watch. I mean, he averaged 27 points per game his senior year. I think he led the state in scoring. And, when you're in middle school and you're going to these games, as a 7th, 8th grader, I'm viewing Adam Perry like he's like LeBron James,
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember Dre Key and I would always go to the games and we would bet on how many points Adam would score. And he was going up against some awesome Mark Morse teams: Josh Wilson, Mickey Polis, Ryan Campbell, Tyler Hayes. Chris Hutton. There were some really, really good teams in that era. And so I would say that was probably like prime time for me as far as Civil Wars go. I think right now it could get really fun. I know Dre has a good group. And Dre's an awesome coach, and obviously Backamus is a legend, and no matter who Backamus has, he's going to figure out a way to win. And so I think the next couple of years could be really fun, especially with Kevin Holden and Cameron Holden coming up. Kevin just has a really special, unique feel for the game. I think the sky is the limit for him, and I'm hoping he grows. And if he gets anywhere near 6 foot, he's going to be a real I mean, he already is a problem, but he's going to be a real problem. And then his older brother Cameron is no joke either. His speed is just next level. So yeah, I'm excited for the next couple of years. I'm ready to see what happens with that. What about you, Monarch?
Favorite memory was, of course, watching those games, the sit down Fowler, the fire marshals having to come in because there's so many people, at the Lumberdome. And, when you're 10, 11 years old, it's like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. Unfortunately, when we played all long, I'm not going to mince words here. They weren't very good. They just weren't very good. And I'm not trying to put them down. Or they just weren't very good, And one moment, and, we were a pretty good team, so we'd beat them up a little bit. But one of my favorite moments was we're playing Ari Long at home, and Bryce Isley, I'll say his name, we have a flex cut coming through, and I got the ball, and I just laser one in, and it skims right off of his head, right to Ryan Littlefield, and he catches it and lays it in, and Bryce comes down. It's like, oh my, you just gave me a haircut. So that's just something that sticks out to me. Unfortunately, there weren't too many great games because it was, just the nature of what it was. But yeah, it was always fun beating those guys. No offense.
None taken. I wasn't there.
No offense. I got one for Buff here. So, as a young coach who, we made a pigtail game, but we've yet to make it to the postseason and make a deep run. What was it like taking Woodland that first time back when the state tournament was 8? I mean, it was tough to get in. What was it like going through the district tournament, and you're winning games, and the process of just getting there? What's the feeling like? What are practices like? What's it like to get to that next point?
I was pretty fortunate, actually. In my first year at Woodland, we got district title game and got to regionals, and actually played it at Mark Morris and lost to Cascade Christian by 2 in a shootout, 39-37. Great game on offense there. And I thought, man, I got to district title in my first year, got to the final 16, and this is going to be pretty easy, right? You get there, and the next year you don't make the final 16, and you're thinking, wow, it's not so easy after all. I had a better team, but then we went from 1A to 2A. And then the next year we were really young. So my third year at Woodland, final year, I think I only had one senior. And we finished like third in the league, third in districts, and got to the 16 game. And this is before you had the 1 through 16, obviously. So it was just a random draw. And we draw North Kitsap. And I'm thinking, I knew nothing about North Kitsap. I'd only been in 2A for 2 years. They had a brand new coach and Scott Ornest, who won a state title this year, actually. And so, prepping for all this stuff, I'm a huge scout team film breakdown. We watch film every day.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. And here we are preparing to play a team I have 0 film on. Not one person would give any film up. I'd seen them on a couple like newspaper highlight pictures and some box scores on Max Preps. Other than that, completely blind. So, the preparation was a little different than normal. We're going in there with just like some names and a couple pictures of guys. Not a huge scouting report. But we kind of took the approach like, well, we got here, we're playing on house money now, we're not supposed to win. So, we went out there and we actually had one of the most amazing first halves of my coaching career. Tanner Sixbury was a pretty good player I had then. He had 28 points the first half. First wow. North Kitsap, yeah. And was on fire. And we ended up winning that game and upsetting them. And they were in contention to win the title that year. On paper. And so it was crazy because you ride the wave, you go there. We won at Mount Tahoma, which was like playing at a college for us. You guys have been to Mount Tahoma. It's a pretty big place. And the game before us was Sela versus Tumwater. It was packed, and most of the fans stuck around for our game, so it was kind of a nice little atmosphere there. So we win that game, and then we get our drawing for the final 8, and you got a couple days to prepare, and we get our drawing of this decent team called Clarkston who hadn't lost a game in a couple years. So I start gathering some film on them, and every game is running clock. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like, this is, you can go to state and just, get a nice butt kicking. So we prepared, we watched film, we come up with all these great plans. And, first 2 minutes of that first round state game, it's tied 2-2. Halftime was like 38-6. It was running clock, first play, the first part of the third quarter, fastest game in state history. So, we got there.
You got one record.
Yeah, it was a really cool experience on the record books. And I look at it like this. So this is what I tell everybody. Everybody asks about it, and I left after that year, and that was going to be my best team coming back. That's the year Coach Johnson took over, and they went and had to play Foss in the first year of the RPI. So kind of a tough deal. But I'll tell everybody this. When they say, you got running clock, that was embarrassing. Well, yeah, I got running clock at state tournament. It's a lot more embarrassing not getting to the postseason or not getting to the state tournament than getting there and getting running clock. I'd take that running clock feeling again over not having a chance to get there.
Yeah, for sure.
At 2-2 though, that was being played at a Buff clip.
Yeah, we had.
Yeah.
If we could have kept it at that clip.
Right, they matched it with a dunk. I thought this is gonna be a great game. Then we scored 2 baskets the next 30 minutes. It was great.
Was that Trayvon Allen? Is that the kid's name?
Highlights. Yeah, he went to Idaho the next year. He was a senior that year.
Yeah, I was at Lewis Clark State, Lewiston Clarkston, right on the border. So I went and watched him a couple times. That kid was tough. His younger brother's good too. So
yeah.
Hey, Buff, as far as like the film goes and scouting, what is do you do the same non-league and league? Do you go pretty in depth, or do you what is your breakdown?
This guy watches more film than anybody. This guy will send me Snapchats of him watching film. I go, I know you're a PE guy, but you're watching more film. I mean, your eyes got to be hurting.
Does that trickle down to players?
His printing budget is what worries me.
My wife's over shaking her head about the film comment, but a lot of late nights, a lot of lunch times, a couple times during class. Don't tell anybody that, but we do a couple different things. Non-league, obviously, you don't have as much preparation, you don't have as much film, you don't have whatever, but usually I know the coach's tendencies, or I think I do, so we try to prepare ourselves for that. I mean, we do a series of shell drills that prepare us for guarding all kinds of screens in theory. But until you go out there and do it, you never know if it's going to work. But in league, we put a little more time into it. These guys have all seen my scouting reports that I put together. They're probably a little over the top for high school kids, but I always say it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. So we do a fast draw playbook, and like if I'm playing, Kelso, obviously we know they're going to run flex, so we're not going to print that out. But that's their base offense. We'll practice guarding the flex screen, how we're going to guard. Are we beating it through? Are we pushing over the top? Whatever. And then I do like 4 or 5 of their basic sets usually, and then we have a printout, and they all have it the day before. We walk through it, and then pregame we always watch film before the game. And usually our film session will consist, the day of the game, it's just basically like, here's their 4 or 5 tendencies we're looking to take away. Here's some of their personnel, individual moves. Let's say, if you're guarding Shaw, how are we going to guard him? Well, we're just going to pray. We're not sure how we're going to guard Shaw. Hope he misses. No, but if you're guarding somebody like in our league, like, let's say Ari Long, for example. Well, you're going to take Calvin Holden and you're going to face guard him because he's going to shoot it from anywhere across half court. So you don't want him to get a touch in space. Now, his brother Cam Holden, you're going to just backpedal and hope that you can stay in front eventually, and maybe you'll miss one. So, just a couple of tendencies, how we're going to guard those individuals, and what you want to do for that. And you hope they read the printout. Sometimes, like, we lost to Woodland our last game of the year this year to miss the playoffs, and one of our key notes was don't let Trey Hansen shoot threes, and he had 7 threes, 6 in the quarter. So we wonder how much that actually helps us at times when the one note for an individual was do not let him catch and shoot, and he hit 7. You wonder how much time it effort put into it. But, same time, high school kids, for me, it's a little bit tough because I spent a lot of time as a college coach doing scouting reports, making scouting reports. So shifting the gear to make it a little less basic. And with all technology now in the film, I mean, it's crazy what you can break down and send to kids. I mean, Coach Tilton's been making clips like mad, and I've watched more Castle Rock clips on Instagram lately than I have in a long time. So.
Hey, follow CRHS Hoops on Instagram. But yeah, I mean, the kids love that, so that was kind of fun for us. I'll say something, kind of what Coach Buff was saying. There's two different sides to it. There's paralysis by analysis, and prior planning prevents poor performance.
What does the first one mean?
Paralysis by analysis, like what Coach Buff was saying. He's saying you can't let this guy shoot threes. You practice it, you rep it, you're not giving this guy space. You're maybe hedging hard on screen so he's not getting space. Well, in a game, he's hitting 6 threes. So guys, maybe are not over prepared, but, maybe are thinking too much. And then when the game comes, all the work and all the preparation you've done, it may actually be a detriment, because it's happened. We went down to La Center, had a great plan, and one of their best kids was out, so we felt we could take advantage of it. We felt really good. We jump on we're up 8-2. We feel really good about it. Same thing as coach at the state tournament. Well, at halftime it was like 45-18. And then our plan just went out the window, and that was that. And then on the flip side, we're going down to Seton Catholic. This was still a follow-up after kids were sick. We didn't really have much of a game plan. We just kind of talked about some stuff, and we come down, and we're down 1 with a minute to go. So it's just kind of the weird with high school kids, and, as a coach, sometimes you never know what you're going to get. So.
And you got any of your great questions left?
Oh boy, I'll ask this one this is for everybody. What are some of the things that people don't tell you? Let's say you get the call, you got the coaching job. What are some of the things that people don't tell you that goes into coaching? The time, I know that. Anybody want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they don't tell you the midnight calls that you'll get. Hey, coach, I'm having an allergy attack. My eyes won't open. That was a call that I recently got from a player.
Wow.
Hey, X, Y, or Z. I'm not going to go into details, but just the calls outside of basketball that you get, or that the situations that you're dealing with outside of basketball that come with being around a group of 15 to 20 people. And so I think that's something that coaches need to think about. It's a lot more off the court stuff than I think we think about when we're, initially thinking basketball coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that at the high school level too, where for some of your kids, you're the person who sees them the most. For some of those kids, you become almost their caretaker for a part of the year or part of the day. You got to be checking grades and discipline and making sure kids are where they're supposed to be at times with certain kids. And I think the other thing that, like, for me, and Hayden was there, so he probably saw it. When I first started, I didn't really realize or think enough about what level am I at and what do these kids need. I start by coaching a 6th grade team, and I think I got to put in every play I've ever known in my life. We got to have 35 plays. Well, that's neat until you realize we haven't done enough ball handling. We don't pass very well. We don't have very many guys that can shoot. So this is really cool to have a bunch of plays, but we haven't put enough time into having the skill set to be successful once we come off a screen and have a catch and shoot jumper, or we don't know what to do when we jump stop in the middle of the key. And we can kick it right there, but we haven't really repped or practiced, kicking it out to an open shooter, or the shooter sliding with the guy as he's driving. And from my first team, when they were 6th grade to 7th grade, I had to shift my approach to, with younger kids, skill development. I make them as good of a shooter as I can, catch and shoot, as good of a basketball player as I can, putting a desire to defend in their brain and making that a part of what they do. And I just think when you first start, I didn't think about what level are we at and what do we need, which is something that I had to kind of learn the hard way by having a bunch of plays and not having the skill set to be successful in running them.
Buff, any things that people don't tell you about that goes into being a coach?
I think the main thing is you don't get a parent manual. For high school, they don't give you the how to deal with situations. These people aren't actually your friends. But the key for me, I was lucky because unfortunate and fortunate. I started my career at the college level. You deal with almost zero parents. There's Scott. I mean, you probably attest to that. I mean, you deal with them, but a different level of dealing with them. And most of these kids are there by choice because you've recruited them. And so if they're not there, then move on. And hopefully that doesn't happen too often, especially like Lewis and Clark. They're not all there on full rides, so they're they got to kind of earn their way there a little bit. So you don't deal with a lot of that situations. And then when I shifted gears back to high school, one of my first high school jobs when I came back was coaching with Coach Kinch at Kelso. And one of the nice things for me was to be able to have a mentor. And him and I still talk about, situations that come up and how to handle them, because he's one of the best people dealing with people, I think, that I've ever seen. And I've been around a lot of coaches, and I saw some firsthand stuff that I couldn't believe with how things that went down and problems I dealt with as a C team coach at Kelso, and how he would handle it compared to how my natural reaction was at 25 or 26, and when I first got my head coaching job at Woodland, it was kind of like we were winning, so everybody was a little happier, but there were still problems, and I couldn't fathom why these problems were still happening when we were going 18-10. We're going to state tournament. We've been in the final 16 2 out of 3 years. Like, winning should solve some of these problems, but no, it doesn't always solve the problems. And there's no guideline book as a coach that you get to say, here's how they deal with it. And I think the one thing I try to give advice to new coaches that ask me, if anybody's crazy enough to ask me for advice, I always say, you got to have some guidelines, and you got to understand that all these parents care about their children first, not the team. And as coaches, we care about the team first and not the parents individually, and the kids got to have an understanding that what they hear and what they have to deal with is different than what you're dealing with as a team. And as a coach, sometimes it's hard to separate, like, wait a minute, I don't see this as going on that way. You don't get the same lesson as a coach you get until you experience it. Once you experience that firsthand of how to deal with the parents, it becomes a little different. So yeah, just the parent situation for me is the number one thing that I think, and obviously it's different. Scott probably has to deal with almost no parent problems.
Yeah, I'm super blessed. The only time I deal with the parents is when they're supporting us. We get emails, calls, and texts, saying like congrats on the win or whatever. But I haven't had one issue with a parent at Lewis and Clark.
When players get to that level, the thing I can give my 2 cents on the bull standard is, for one, most time the kid's an adult, right? Another quotations for you. So they can handle their stuff on their own. If they have an issue, they'll come talk about it. And in high school, the parents want to control the kids still. So a lot of times for high school coaches, just dealing with that, as I call them, the parent goggles, right? You got to fathom, what is this really happening? How they really think that? But you know what? It's reality, because they got their perspective and you have your perspective. So I don't know if there's a right answer, but all new coaches need to have that parent guideline 101 class, maybe online. Maybe Tilton can write that for us up one of these days. But yeah,
I think at the college level, more than on the court stuff, they just want to know that their kids are being taken care of and being watched over, and because they're away from home, so like 95% of our kids are from California, and so their parents aren't a drive away, so they're not really too worried about like how many shots their kids are getting. They're more worried about, is my kid going to leave with a degree? Are they safe? Do they have someone they can go to if something comes up? And so I don't know if that's the case everywhere. I don't know if it's the same like at Lower Columbia or, at University of Washington. But from my experience in my couple of years, it's been nothing but support from the parents.
I would say a thing that helped me, a good friend of mine, Wes Armstrong, who's the coach at Kalama, when I got hired at Castle Rock, he gave me program philosophy And I kind of looked over and I took some things and, left some things, but I took some things. And one of them was, kind of dealing with parents and what you're going to do. And so at the beginning of each season, we just have a parent meeting. And basically, these are the things that we talk about. If you want to come talk to me, basically the treatment of your son, making sure that their kid's all right. That's basically the only thing that we talk with parents about. And then things to not talk with your coach, playing time, other players, team philosophy. So we lay that out clear, and that has helped. Of course, there's going to be issues. And I know Buff has probably dealt with some stuff, and I know Justin's probably seen some things that Coach Kinch has had to deal with, and it's the reality. But that has helped, just being clear and giving good communication. Like, hey, this is what we talk about. This is what we don't talk about. And another thing is time. Everybody thinks they can coach November through, February. Hopefully for me, one day March. But it's the March through, October, the summer league, the open gyms, time away from your family, putting together camps. We didn't have a youth league last year, so this is our first year we did a youth league, and doing all the time that takes for that. So time is one of those things that, god dang, man, it takes a lot of time to get this thing going. I know.
Well, boys,
Robert's a Highlander Hoop Club guy, but he doesn't run that anymore.
What's that?
So I know you're a Highlander Hoop Club guy. You're always locked in on Saturdays.
Yeah, well, you're right about time, but I think the end of that sentence is it takes time to do it well and to do it right.
Yeah.
And if you want to be successful at that level, there's going to be a lot of extra time put in. And yeah, if you're not willing to do that, or you weren't expecting it, I wouldn't expect you to do this for too long.
Yeah.
Any final comments or questions from anyone?
I got one question. Didn't write it down or anything, just kind of popped in my head here. Give me one thing from each of you guys that you've taken from a coach you've worked with in the past. Well, you guys think about it. Go ahead and think about it, because I'll tell you why this comes up to me. A lot of times people ask me why my philosophy is this way, or why I do things this way, and I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of coaches. I mean, I coached with Roffler, Hall of Fame NWAC guy. Coach Sparling's got over 400 wins in the Division II level. I was with Coach Kinch at Kelso. He's got 400 and something wins, 300 and something wins. A lot of successful coaches. I was with Coach Wallace his first year at RE Long, Pisapia. You were in high school then, which is actually what you and Roberts share in common here. Tilton, you're the one who hasn't played for me in this forum here. But, people ask me things all the time, and I come back with, I try to take away something from each person I coached with, and, some good, some bad. You take what you like, you leave what you don't like, and hopefully you can put together enough information to have something successful. So give me one thing from somebody you've worked with or somebody you've been around that why you chose it.
I think one big one is that I took from Coach Wallace was he was just always so in tune with his players off the court. He was always checking in, always wanting to know about how their families were, what they were, planning to do this summers, how other sports were going for them. And I really enjoyed that. Even to this day, I consider Coach Wallace a friend, a mentor, a coach of mine to this day. And it's because he's constantly checking in with me, whether it's on Facebook or with a text or see him at an RE Long game. Coach Fowler was the same way at RE Long for me. They both just, beyond the basketball court, they really cared about how I was doing in life. And so that's something that I took from those two that I'm trying to implement with my players moving forward.
Robert?
What, does that mean you haven't had enough time to think yet or something?
Well, I got a few ideas, but I feel like you got something on the tip of your tongue.
Well, I've spent a majority of my time working with Kinch at Kelso, but I'm just thinking back to this year where there was some times where we seemed really underprepared, or our guys just looked shocked by something that we thought we had prepared for. And I thought it was pretty impressive and powerful how in the halftime locker room and post game, Kinch put that entirely on his shoulders, even though it'd be easy for us to put it on them. And we talked about this for 3 days. We talked about this before the game. We talked about this in film. He wore that right on his shoulders and said, I didn't prepare you guys well enough. That won't happen again, that type of thing. And I think it's important for that player relationship that Scott's talking about, that you're not overly negative and you recognize who you're dealing with. You're dealing with kids. They're not adults. They're not even going to be held responsible for a lot of decisions they make yet because they're not out in the real world. And I thought that was pretty powerful.
Yeah, I would say the thing that I took, playing for Coach Backamus, who, over 600 wins, top 5 most wins in the state? I don't even know, but, multiple league titles, district titles, state tournament appearances. One of the things I took from him is a demand for excellence. And, I would say, I'm not too in tune with like the development of other programs and stuff, but, I've seen plenty of Mark Morris guys who C team for 1 year, maybe even two, Austin Bragg played a C team for 2 years. Nate Teeters was on C team for 2 years, so, and then have those guys be elite varsity players or really good varsity players, and just getting the most out of his guys and holding them to a really high standard, because at the high school level, like what Coach Justin was saying, a lot of these guys aren't responsible for their own decisions. A lot of them, come from broken homes and families who are, not what maybe we had, fortunately for us, but just holding people to high standards and allowing them to be great. So that's something that I took, and that's something that I try to implement each and every day.
I got one more, and then I want to hear your Buff. I work for Coach Christina Williams, Coach K at Lewis and Clark right now. She's the head coach, and her level of being organized is next level. And I've seen what that does for our staff and our players as far as not having to worry about things. They know they can just show up and things are going to be ready to go. And so she takes a lot of stress off everyone else's plate that I'm probably a little bit more on the other side of not being organized. So I need to, hopefully over this year and the next year, pick up a lot of the things that she's laying down as far as her organizational skills, because it really, as far as the team goes, builds a culture for success. So that's another person, another thing that I've been around that I'm learning from. I'd like to hear, Coach Buff, what your answer for this is, though, because you've been around some legends.
That there's two things, and they're completely different, not even related, really. The first thing is that I learned from Coach Roffler, and timing, the tempo, and the spacing of your offense is so important. And I think that's why high school is related to junior college a lot of times, because you have these players that come and they go. You only get guys for 2 years. I mean, my varsity team this year, we had 7 transfers that are only there for the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, there's a house being built every 5 seconds in Ridgefield. People are moving, they're leaving, they're moving. So, we've had to adjust with that, and it was really evident this year how our offense struggled because we didn't have the experience of guys who'd been in the system. So, having timing and tempo is something that I learned from Coach Roffler, of how execution of your plays, where guys should be. You don't have to be faster, quicker, stronger, jump higher than somebody if you move the right way or set your man up and have the right timing. And then the second thing, not even related to really basketball, I took from Coach Kinch, is that the importance of staff. I mean, every good head coach is only really as good as their staff. And I unfortunately had a different staff the first 4 years of my head coaching career every year. Maybe that's my fault, maybe not, but I had different staff every year. And I had the same staff 2 years in a row at Ridgefield, and it was our most successful 2 years. And this year we had to change things up. It was a good staff, but it was new, so we're trying to figure things out again. And when you have a good staff, you don't have to reteach the wheel, and they understand what you're talking about. I write a practice plan in my first 2 years at Ridgefield, and they'd be like, "What does that mean?" And I'm using my own lingo. And now I write the practice plan. There's no questions. They look at it. They know that what my crazy adjectives mean, or what my abbreviation of a drill or letters I put on there. So yeah, the importance of your staff that helps you and supports you and knows, what you need and how to get the program in a good spot. So those are really two things for me.
I got one final question, then we can call it a day. Is that good?
Yeah.
My schedule's clear, so don't worry about me.
Okay. Well, we got to end this thing on a positive. What is the biggest joy or the most pleasure that you take out of being a coach? And this is open for anybody. What is the best thing about being a coach, I would say?
Besides the paycheck?
Aside from rolling in the millions? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's the obvious one, which is the relationships. I think, I think the coaching circle community, no matter what the level is, I think it's a lot smaller than people think. And I think there's a level of respect that you have for other coaches, no matter what sport they're involved with. And then the relationships of you and the student athletes, I think, is also super important. Getting invited to, special events, whether it's weddings or, like whatever it is, graduations, those type of things I think are really important. And I think those are like the most valuable things that come with being a coach is the relationships that you have.
Roberts?
Well said, Scott. I would agree with both of those things in terms of the unique circle it puts you in. I mean, some of the connections that I have from time spent with in coaching and at camps, and some of those connections are some of the ones I enjoy the most and the people that I like to be around. I think the relationships piece though is the biggest. I mean, it's the same with me for teaching. I get to build relationships and have those interactions and be a difference for some kids. I mean, and for some kids, basketball practice is the best part of their day, and you get to see that joy that they have. And I think back to when they give their speeches at our banquet as seniors and all the memories they have and memories that I have when I played and getting to stay in that world and in that circle. I find to be joyful, I think is the word that Coach Tilton used. And I last year, a kid at a graduation party writes me a thank you card and talks about how excited he is to be on my staff one day and coach with me, which I think continues to grow that circle and that group of people that are like-minded in a lot of ways, and builds a really great, strong community to be a part of.
Buffy?
I love the competitive nature of coaching. The natural competitive juices get flowing. We get out there, and November rolls around, or for Scott, September. You start getting in the gym and start working on seeing where you're at and where they can go, and the development side of it, basketball wise, development side of where you can take a team. And sometimes your team isn't as good, but your record's good. Sometimes your team is talented and you don't do as well. I mean, there's two sides of that, and you never know what you're going to get out of that until it's all said and done. The other thing is obviously the relationships. Coach Roberts mentioned building relationships. I mean, before I was in building as a head coach and teach the same building, it was completely different. Now I see these kids all the time. We have lunch meetings all the time, talk on a regular basis, have them in class, develop a totally different relationship that I had when I was just coaching and not seeing the kids all the time. So, that relationship side's huge. The one thing we all have in common besides our good looks here is that we're all basketball coaches. So, I mean, that's kind of what draws you together. And a lot of it socially is awesome to have connections and do things like this and see people. A lot of times we'll be in the mall walking with my 13-year-old son, a 14-year-old son now. And when he takes a minute to look up from his phone, he'll say, "How'd you know that guy?" I said, "Well, he coaches at, some school, or he played for me at Heritage in 2012, or, something, just crazy connections you make all over the place with basketball." So that's great. Seeing kids move on after high school, after college, move on and go do things and be in touch with them. Stay in contact. So, I mean, both you guys, besides Tilton, have played. I was a coach on your staff at one time. So, besides feeling really old, it's nice to have those connections down the line. Some of the games you guys were mentioning earlier, we were recapping some of those Mark Morris, R.A. Long games. I was in the crowd for a lot of those. You might have been 10, but I was like 22. So, watching those games and going down some memory lane and, coaching on staffs, guys, I mean, it's always fun to have those relationships and stay connected with the coaches.
Yeah, I would say relationships, obviously. One of my kids, Ethan Purdue, I played for me last year and now was on my staff this year, going to LCC. It just that was really nice to have. And, the relationship with guys, I anytime I see it's their birthday, I let them know happy birthday. They're asking how we're doing and, being a part of their lives, getting invited to, dinners and stuff like that with former parents and things like that. So that's really cool. And just, cheering on the kids in their life. And then another joy aside from, you guys, I'm not going to reiterate, all the relationship stuff is awesome. And I've been very, very blessed with my kids and community. But another thing is like, after a big win, the locker room, that moment where you're with your guys and you're jumping and hooting and hollering and celebrating something that you guys as a whole unit did together. I think that is just, maybe on a smaller scale, but those are the things that you remember is, going on the road and beating Monty when you haven't beat him in 7 years and coming and jumping around and celebrating in the locker room. So, I'd say there's two different types of joy, but that's one that sticks out with me.
Nothing beats it.
Nothing.
All right, fellas, my computer's about to die.
Yeah.
It's been real.
All right, I'll talk to you guys later.
Hey, hold on. Whoa. Make sure you get one last plug in there for Coach_Burt and your Twitter followers.
I'm going to edit that out.
We'll get you going.
I got to get to 200.